Hey there. Okay, this is a video for the Harebrained Schemes Battletech game that is currently in beta. I have it running down here, but what I'm doing here is I've created this spreadsheet regarding damage values for all the weapons in the game, for melee attacks, and I believe this is the damage values for death from above. This is for comparison purposes. I played the Battletech game a couple of days ago. I did several matches like a lot of other people on YouTube. I had a lot of fun doing it. But now it's time to get down and serious into the criticisms and analysis part of what's going on in this beta and what we may think is wrong with it and providing feedback. So we're going to start here with these weapons and damage values. One thing to note is that armor value seems to have changed over the what they would call the pre-alpha version. The videos they had of the pre-alpha version from back in the MechCon, it looked like the armor values were multiplied by 3 from what I saw in the videos, but now I've gone over some of them. Armor values and internal structure is modified by 5 over tabletop values, which is a significant boost compared to the other game, MechWarrior Online, where they are only doubled except for the head, which is given a slight buff. Now the weapons have also been modified, and there is already some discussion about whether some of these are accurate and whether some of these should be changed. First off, we have this one group. These two weapons are marked in the same group, the light weapons, the machine gun and the small laser. They're in their own separate weapon group because these two weapons are the only weapons you can shoot if you do a melee attack. You can do a melee, and if you have these weapons will fire in addition to the melee. So the damage will be added on to your melee attack if these hit. The machine gun here has a damage value of 3 times 5. The way I understand this works, that means it can do 5 separate hits for 3 damage each. So some of these hits may miss. You could get, say, 2 hits for 3 damage each. You could get 4 hits for 3 damage each. Anywhere in between. 0 to 5 hits for 3 damage each. So the maximum is 15 damage, which is 1 step lower than the small laser, which is marked as a damage value of 20. I'm not quite sure if it does 20 automatically when it hits, for reasons I'll get into when I get to these other energy weapons here. Speaking of which, here we have the other 3 energy weapons in their own separate group. First we have the medium laser, which is highest damage value of 25. The large laser with the highest damage value of 40. And the PPC with the highest damage value of 50. Now, to my knowledge, none of these weapons I've mentioned so far do stability on their own, except for the PPC. I'm going to have to do some testing at some point to find out if I can figure out what exactly that value is. I have a guess now, but I want to go back and check that over. It would be easier to check over if we had multiplayer, but we don't. Because with multiplayer, you could get somebody else who agrees to do testing, and you can take your time and just shoot single weapons at each other to see what happens. But you can't do that against the AI because the AI is not going to sit there and go, yeah, let's test. The AI is going to say, no, I'm here to kill you. So it's a little more difficult. Another thing I wanted to note is I have watched a few weapon shots. I've seen a single PPC shoot and hit a target, and it does not register the full 50. There are times when it's registering somewhat less. From what I have seen, I'm going to go back and check that over, but what I have seen so far indicates that energy weapons do not always hit for the full value. This could be why there's already discussion on the forums. Some people feel the PPC is not worth its value at its damage value, and this will also come up with some other weapons. So the PPC, when it hits in tabletop and when it hits in the other game, MechWarrior Online, it hits for full damage where it hits. But here it looks like it's hitting where it hits, but sometimes it's doing less than full damage. So that's a point of discussion right there, and possibly for the other energy weapons as well. Should they be hitting for full damage, or should they be hitting for less? Next, we come to the autocannons here. The AC2 does 25 points of damage. The AC5 does 50 points. The AC10 does 75. And the AC20 does 100. And all four of these are also supposed to do stability on their own, like the PPC, according to the manual. Now, one thing that's obvious to note before we continue to the missiles, these weapons are modified by different values over their tabletop values. The machine gun in tabletop only does 2 points. This is a modification of 7.5. The small laser, I believe, does 3, if I remember right. So this is almost 6.2 thirds, 6 2/3 modification. The medium laser does 5 in tabletop, so that's times 5. The large laser does 8, so this is times 5. The PPC does 10, that's times 5. So these three are all times 5. This is a unique 6 2/3. This is 7.5. The Autocannon 2 is modified by a factor of 12.5 because it does 2 damage in tabletop. That's a significant boost right there compared to these other weapons here. The AC5 is modified by 10. So this was buffed, but it was buffed slightly less than the Autocannon 2. And one other thing to note, the AC2 does the same damage as a medium laser. You would think that it would do something like the machine gun with 15 damage maximum. It wouldn't be 3 times 5, it would be 15, but it's got a really good boost there to it. The AC5, which normally would do damage like a medium laser, is doing damage like a PPC. That's pretty significant. The AC10 has been modified by 7.5, which is the same as the machine gun. It's not as significant as the AC2 or the AC5, but still, it's been buffed like the machine gun. Normally, it's supposed to do damage of 10 in tabletop. It's the same damage value as a PPC, but it's significantly better than a PPC. And then the AC20, which would do double what a PPC would do, is doing double. It's doing 100. This is modified by 5. So the autocannons are not modified by a consistent rate. The lower class autocannons are getting better buffs, with the AC2 getting the best buff so far, while the AC20 is buffed similar to the energy weapon group here. Next we have the missiles. They're really in one group, but I've separated by SRM and LRM. All the missiles in tabletop, each individual SRM does 2 points. So an SRM2 could do 2 points or 4 points. An SRM4 can do anywhere between 2 to 8 points. An SRM6 from 2 to 12 in steps of 2. Here, they've been buffed pretty well. An SRM2 can do 2 hits of 10 damage each. That's 20 damage. That's a modification of times 5, much like the energy weapon group. The SRM4 is the same. It can just do 4 hits, and the SRM6 is the same. It can do 6 hits. So all the SRMs are modified similar to the energy weapons. And these are also supposed to do stability. According to the manual, SRMs and LRMs are supposed to do the best stability in the game. They're supposed to do better at causing stability on the opponent, on the target, better than the autocannon, better than the PPC. Next, we have the LRMs. The LRMs are all 4 times whatever the launcher size is. So an LRM-5 is supposed to do 5 hits of 4. In tabletop, each individual missile is supposed to do 1. So these are all modified by times 4, which is 1 step lower than the energy weapons, 1 step lower than the short-range missiles, 1 step lower than the Autocannon 20, which were all modified by times 5. It's rather interesting how there's been different modifiers applied here. It's not a flat rate across all the weapons, with the Autocannon 2 having the best buff of all, 12.5, and the worst, I believe, goes to the LRMs. I'm not exactly sure the reasoning why there were the different modifications, but this has already become a point of discussion among people in the beta on the Harebrained Battletech forums. Now we're going to move over to the melee and the DFAs. Here I've listed all the mechs with their tonnage, their melee damage, and only the jumping mechs got DFA values. These I took by going into the game, and when you would start a match, the minute you start a match and you click on a mech, you could see the melee value. If you changed from the move or sprint to the jump button, the melee value would change. So this changed value is what I presume the DFA is. I know I've done a DFA once in a Griffin. Actually, I did it 3 times in the same match. And this looks about right for what I saw when I was in that match. So, the Locust, the 20-ton mech, has a melee value of 15, which is not that significant in my view for it, considering the worst Locust, the 1V, has a medium laser and 2 machine guns. If it does a melee, it's giving up a 25 damage medium laser to do a 15 damage melee plus the 2 machine guns. I don't know if melee does stability. I guess it would, because that would have to make up for the loss of 10 damage. Without that, it would be pretty odd to go and do a melee with a Locust, except for fun value if you wanted to get serious about this. Next is the Commando, the 25-ton mech. This has a melee of 35, which is a significant boost compared to the Locust, which only had 15. The Locust is doing damage 5 less than its tonnage. The Commando is doing melee damage 10 more than its tonnage. And it's both variants of the Commando that do this. Just like all 3 variants of Locust have the same melee damage value. So next we come to the Urban Mech. Now the Urban Mech is a 30-ton mech, and it has a melee of 40. So like the Commando, it's boosted by 10. And it has a death from above damage value of 30. Now, one thing I've noticed about the death from above is it hits above the waist, which increases the chance of a head hit. So I think that's why they tend to lower the death from above damage number, though you will see some oddity later on, such as in the next mech, the Jenner. 35-ton mech. It has a melee value of 35 and a death from above of 35. It's basically its own tonnage. So a Jenner has a worse melee than an Urban Mech, and the same as a Commando. And it's got a death from above, the same as its tonnage, which is slightly better than an Urban Mech. Next comes the Panther, the last of the current light mechs we have access to, 35 tons as well, but it has a melee of 50. And it's got a death from above of 35 like the Jenner. Wow. Okay. That's a significant melee buff right there. That's 15 points over its tons. That's the best melee light mech in the game. So now we move on to the medium mechs here. The 45-ton Vindicator has a melee of 55 and a death from above of 45. Up to here, I've seen a trend where the death from above seems to be equal to the tonnage, which will not hold true later on. The melee has been slightly buffed, but not as well as the Panther. It's got a 10 increase over its tonnage, which is similar to the Urban Mech and Commando. Now, here's where we get into an oddity. 50 tons is where we get into different chassis. Not different variants, different chassis. We have 3 different chassis at 50 tons. The Centurion, the Hunchback, and the Trebuchet. And they do not have the same melee value. The Centurion has a melee value of 70. That's a 20-ton boost over its tonnage, a 20-point boost, excuse me, which is better than what the Panther got. But even better off, you have the Hunchback, which has a melee value of 80. That's a 30-point boost over its tonnage. And then at the bottom of the 50-tonners, you have the Trebuchet with a melee of 65. So that's rather interesting that they took 3 mechs of the same tonnage, 3 different chassis, and they gave them 3 different melee values. And after I go down this list, I'm going to give you a theory why I think they did a strange thing like this, which you will also see here at the 55 tons, where we have 3 chassis again. The Griffin, the Kintaro, and the Shadowhawk. The Griffin has a melee of 70 and a death from above of 50. Now, unlike the others before this is the first time we're seeing a death from above that's different than the tonnage. It's 5 points less than the tonnage. All the ones before were equal to the tonnage. Its melee attack is equal to that of a 50-ton Centurion. So it's not as beneficial. It's beneficial more like a Trebuchet. A Kintaro also has a 70-ton melee attack, much like the Griffin. Yet a Shadowhawk of the same tonnage as the Griffin and Kintaro has a melee of 85 and a death from above of 50. So it's received a small drop in the death from above like the Griffin, but it's better at melee. That is a boost of 30 points over its tonnage. I believe that's the best. No, that's the same as the Hunchback. The Hunchback got 30 over its tonnage too. So up to now, the Hunchback and the Shadowhawk have gotten, compared to their tonnage values, the best melee attacks. Now we move into the 4 heavy mechs. The Quick Draw. This is where things get a little more strange. 60-ton mech. It has a melee of 40. This is the first time we're seeing a melee that is less than the tonnage of the mech. I don't know why that is. I honestly don't know. Because both quick draw variants in the beta are majorly designed for short-range fighting, and the quick draw, when you see its artwork, it looks pretty sturdy, so it looks like it can deliver a punch, yet it's been given a very low melee value compared to its tonnage. It suffered a loss. And on top of that, its death from above value, like the 55-tonners, is 5 tons less than it, 5 points, screwed up again, 5 points less than its tonnage. Its DFA value is 55. I have no idea what's happening with this poor mech. The Catapult, 65-ton mech with a melee of 60 and a death from above of 60. So this death from above value is holding consistent with the 55-tonners and up. It's 5 points less than the tonnage. The melee is also 5 points less. It's not as bad a loss as the quick draw compared to its tonnage, but it's still a loss of 5 points. The Jaeger mech is in the same boat as the Catapult when it comes to melee, 65-ton mech with a 60-point melee. So up until now, the heavy mechs have suffered from having melee that does less than your tonnage until we get to the Orion. The Orion is a 75-ton mech with a 95-point melee. It's not as significant a boost as the Shadowhawk or Hunchback, but it is a boost. Now we come to the 4 assault mechs. The 80-ton Awesome has a melee value of 120. That is 40 points over its tonnage. That is the highest boost of melee compared to tonnage of all the mechs on the list. There's only one other mech that ties that, which we will get to in a bit. The Victor is another 80-ton mech. It has a melee of 100. 20 less than the Awesome. And it has a death from above value of 75. This seems to be keeping with the trend from the 55-ton mechs and up, where the death from above is 5 points less than the tonnage. Next is the 85-ton Battlemaster, which has a melee of 115. That's a little better than what the Victor got. And then there's the Atlas, the 100-ton Atlas, the Icon, which has a melee value of 140, a 40-point boost over its tonnage, the same as what the Awesome had. So the Awesome and the Atlas made out if you compare melee to tonnage. I don't remember offhand what melee is in tabletop, but just from these values here, the Awesome and the Atlas benefited the most. These guys are two very punchy mechs that can dish out some serious pain. Other mechs that seem to have really gotten a benefit, in my view, the Battlemaster is 30 points over its tonnage. What else got? The Hunchback is 30 points over its tonnage. The Shadowhawk is 30 points over its tonnage. When you look at these mechs, it seems like there might be some type of pattern to why the melee and DFA values are the way they are. The DFA values are a pretty obvious pattern. So far, from what we have seen, 45 tons and less gets a DFA equal to the tonnage. 55 tons and up gets a DFA 5 points less than the tonnage. But the melee is all over the place. I don't know what's going on with this poor quick draw or the catapult or the Jaeger mech. I could somewhat understand the catapult and the Jaeger mech because they're mainly designed for long-range combat. If you use the stock variants, the catapult we have is the one with 2 LRM-15s and medium lasers. We have 2 Jaeger mechs in the beta. They're both mainly long-range with autocannons, and one has some LRMs too. And the quick draw, though, is more of a short-range mech. And the way it's designed, you would think it would be pretty punchy, but it suffers from a low melee value. In addition to that, when discussing the catapult and quick draw, if they lowered the melee because maybe they thought these mechs' rolls were supposed to be long range, so they don't need melee, in addition to how they're designed, the catapult doesn't really have arms. It could kick, it could headbutt. But these mechs, the way they were designed stock was to be long-range mechs, which might be a reason why they have low values. But the problem with that argument would be we're going to get the ability to modify mechs, which means we could modify them to be mid-range fighters or short-range fighters, so why have low melee values? Kind of puts you off from turning them into a short-range fighter. And the quick draw is supposed to be a short-range fighter from its weapon loadout of medium lasers and SRMs. Even if you modify it, why would you give it a low melee value? That makes no rational sense. Some of the other values, they're not as bad, though there is some interesting question why they were chosen. Like the Awesome, both Awesome variants we have access to are long-range fighters. They can go mid-range, but they're really designed for long-range fighting, but they have a serious punch from their melee right here. The Atlas is an icon. I'm not even going to question its melee value. The Battlemaster is somewhat of an icon. It's got a decent boost compared to its tonnage, and it's got a lot of short-range weapons. The Victor, I could see the Victor getting the lowest benefit of the assaults because it's got the jump jets and it can DFA. So that makes sense. But when you look back at the heavies, this actually shows another thing that doesn't make sense. Like the Victor's melee value is lower than other assaults because it has the DFA. But you look here, the Catapult's melee value is the same as the Jägermech. But the Catapult can DFA and the Jägermech cannot. Wouldn't you expect a Jägermech to be higher using the same logic in the assaults? I would. And the Quick Draw has a better DFA value than its melee value, which I just don't understand the Quick Draw design of its melee value. I don't get it. In the medium area, I could see the Hunchback having a significant boost of melee compared to tonnage because the stock designs are, again, short range, the ones we have access to. If we get access to all of them, there is one long range design and there is another that's sort of a hybrid. Actually, the two of them are both hybrid designs. They can do long range, they can do short range, while the other Hunchback variants are all pretty much focused on short range. So with most Hunchback variants focused on short range, I can understand its melee value. The Trebuchet, I could kind of understand having a lower value because it's more of a long range mech. But what if you modify it in the mech lab? What if you take out its LRMs and you put in SRMs and you make it a short range mech? The Centurion is kind of an all range mech. I can understand it being lower than a Hunchback. You get down here into these three. I'm not sure why the Shadowhawk got as good a benefit as the Hunchback did, while the Griffin and Kintaro are treated as the same. And the Kintaro we have is more of a short-range focus mech than the other two. The Griffin variants, one is primarily long range, while the other is more of a mixed range. The Shadowhawk variants we have are mixed range. The Kintaro is a short range focused specialist, like the Quick Draw, yet the Shadowhawk got the better boost, not the Kintaro. And the Kintaro does not have jump. The Vindicator, this poor Vindicator, I wanted it to be able to do well so badly. It will not be able to do well until I can customize it. I admit, I have fond memories from when I played the tabletop game because one of the first mechs I played was a Vindicator. Excuse me. But the Vindicator has, I believe, a decent melee for its role, and it has death from above, so it can't really complain. The Panther is the punchiest melee mech. I could understand that because the Panther moves not the slowest. The Urban mech is the slowest. But the Panther does come across a certain way as being a tough little mech. So I understand it having a strong melee attack, and it has death from above. It's actually the strongest physical fighter of all the light mechs. The Urban mech is the slowest mech. It doesn't have the boost of the Panther. The Panther's melee over its tonnage is 15 points. The Urban mech is 10, but it's still good for its tonnage, and it's got death from above too. And it's a sturdy design as well. The Jenner, I'm guessing they designed it this way with these values because the Jenner is not, it looks sturdy, but it doesn't really, it also seems to have a slight fragility to it compared to the Panther and the Urban mech. If I actually had to rate those three, I'd rate the Panther and Urban mech as more sturdy designs than a Jenner. The Commando is a small mech. The Locust, it barely has arms, but it can headbutt and kick. I've seen it do it. And it's a Locust. What do you want? It's the other mech that suffers from having a melee less than its tonnage, but it's a Locust. The only reason to do melee is to be crazy. I will say I once had a locust in tabletop that I took and I did a full maximum movement into, what was it? Into an archer with a melee attack. And the way the damage worked back then, both the mechs took damage, and by the time we were done, I was surprised the locust was still alive and it managed to walk away. Because the archer that I hit, the pilot got knocked out, so he could not shoot back at me. So I actually managed to walk away, which was hysterical. But I don't see myself doing that here with the melee value being what it is. The locusts are too fragile. They're not suited for close combat. Of the three variants they have, I think the best one is the 1M with the LRMs, followed by the 1S with the SRMs, and the 1V is fun value. I'm actually going to show that in the next video I do on the Harebrained Schemes Battletech game for both fun and a challenge, a serious issue I want to look at. So anyhow, this is what I have collected so far about weapon values, melee values, death from above values. The weapon discussion is already ongoing as to what people believe should be happening. There's dispute on the PPC. There's dispute on the AC-10. There are some people thinking that, sure, it's nice that they buffed the AC-2 and 5, but they could be lowered a bit. There's a lot more people wanting to see the AC-10 lowered. It seems like the autocannons all got buffs, but it got progressive. Like the autocannon 20 got times 5, the AC-10 got times 7.5, the AC-5 got times 10, and the AC-2 got 12.5. So the AC-2 got the best buff of all, and there are people who would like to see that changed. I do need to check the stability that each weapon can do individually. And I hope the AI doesn't kill me while I try to do that. This is the end of my analysis and data collection. So I hope this helps you in discussing what you think should be done with these items within the game and how this affects the balance. Hope to see you around for the next video I do, which will be about how well the AI can put up a fight against a human opponent with equal sides. Until then, have a good day.